All right, we're live. So, hi
Yay.
everyone. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at Coaching Conversations. I am here with Heidi Schaefer. Heidi Schaefer. She's a coach and action learning facilitator in Vancouver. You can reach Heidi at her website at heidischaefercoaching.ca. I am Todd Karges. I am a coach in Hamilton, Ontario, outside of Toronto, and you can reach me at my website at toddkarges.com. We are here today in Coaching Conversations to talk about authenticity, and I'm very excited for this conversation. So Heidi, I'm going to pass it over to you to kick us off.
Okay, thanks, Coach. And welcome, everybody. I'm really glad you're all here and looking forward to our conversation, Todd.
Me too.
So, authenticity. I think I was interested in having a conversation with Todd about authenticity because I'm not really sure I know what it is. I think, and the more I think about it, the more complicated it gets and more convoluted it gets. So I thought it'd be really interesting for us to kind of explore that and then get your comments and opinions too around that. And so just to set the scene, the sort of kind of questions I have is, I don't really know whether it exists. Does the authentic self exist, right? And the other question I have is, why is it so important that we need to know our authentic selves at this moment, and who or what does it serve that we know our authentic selves? And I mean, it's philosophically quite contested as an idea. The existentialists have one point of view. There are other people who say it doesn't exist, that we exist more in relation rather than as individual selves. So I would really like, Todd, for us to kind of unpack some of that. So my question to you is, what does your authentic self mean to you?
Oh, and isn't that interesting? Because I'll be honest, Heidi, until we had our first conversation on this topic, I think that I was among those people who just used it as a convenient shorthand to mean, being true to myself, whatever that means. And as we talked, what I realized was that it's so much more complex. And the first thing that comes up when I think of that is how different my authentic self feels today than it might have 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And certainly, I've evolved as a person, I've done different things, and I'm showing up differently in the world. And I don't know that I would have described myself as inauthentic in those other times, even though the idea of showing up as the person that I was 10 or 20 years ago right now kind of makes my skin crawl. So there's a mutable nature to it, which is really interesting because it means that I can't necessarily put my finger on it and expect it to be there forever.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I guess similarly, I don't feel there is one authentic self. Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, I don't know that there are many that exist at the same time, but maybe there are, But I feel that life, everything is change, and so
mm-hmm.
To this idea that we have to find this one authentic self that is immutable and fixed, I find doesn't jive with some of the other ways in which I see the world, really, which is about it being changed, which is about how we are in relation with others and how we become ourselves in relationship and with others. And so this notion of this kind of individualistic self that pursues our own path in this way, it's like does that mean we therefore are these islands that interact? I mean, that it doesn't kind of jive with some of the other ways in which I see things. So yes, I feel like it is a mutable and changeable thing, really, for sure.
What I love about what you're saying, Heidi, is that authenticity then within that context is important in how it interacts with others. Because if it really is an island and we're all just sort of islands or bumper cars or whatever, right? Just being our authentic selves and bouncing off of each other, then why are there so many people and coaches and influencers and others who are so, hell bent on getting me to be my authentic self, because that's really the path to success and fulfillment and happiness, right? Like it's got to be something more than just that individualism. It's got to be something more than it can't be just me. But I think it starts there. But if it starts there, then where does it grow to?
Yeah, I mean, and that's where, when we had our first conversation, it rose out of, a coaching session where I said, I'm not sure I like I'm not sure I believe in the authentic self. And then we were talking later on and you said, sounds to me like authentic self, right? and there was, and I said, yeah, well, it did kind of cross my mind. So there is a sense of it, I think, for me, when I try to kind of make sense of what the word is and how that feels for myself, in my heart, in my psyche, in the whole of me, if you like, that there's a sense of there's an unimpededness. Maybe there's an ease, or there's a flow. I mean, I'm an artist, and when I make my work and I'm in the flow, then anything's possible. And if I can get the critic out of the way, then I lose myself in the work, as it were. But I never think of that as my authentic self. But maybe that's what people talk about as the authentic self. I'm never really quite sure. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Christine, about this, and I hope I represent her correctly. But she there was something about authenticity for her that was about our purpose in life, and I felt, we had this in the conversation that I said, well, that's a belief. You believe that, and therefore, what follows from that, you believe that there is an authentic purpose for each of us. And so I guess the other thing about authenticity that I feel is that it means different things for different people. It's a shorthand, sure, but it means different things for different people, and is underpinned by, I guess, a belief system. A different belief system that we all have. So what's underneath in the iceberg is different for everybody. Like the tip is the authentic, the word authentic, but what forms that authenticity is kind of really different.
So it's like there's a presentation of authenticity involved in that as well, right? The things that are authentic that we can show other people, and then the things that are peculiar to ourselves that form that presentation, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. But underneath that, even underneath that, is I guess a feeling of the premise of authenticity for each of us. If like, I don't have that premise of authenticity myself, right? But I know that other people do, in terms of
what's really interesting to me is, because we also talked about how this shows up in our coaching practices when we were having that conversation, right?
Mm.
And certainly, you know, we talked today also about how, you know, online coaches, influencers, whatever, right? You know, want people to achieve or to discover their authentic selves. And whenever I say it like that, it reminds me of, you know, that thing in the 70s when people would go out in the desert to find themselves. But I guess like what's coming up for me when I think of this is within our coaching practices, we come across people all the time who are looking for fulfillment, who are looking for, you know, like a discovery of their best selves to overcome, you know, whatever it is that they're facing, you know, to transform themselves into, you know, the best, most powerful, most authentic, if you will, version of themselves. And I wonder, you know, how those things are connected, or if authentic is just sort of a word that's largely a synonym for those other things.
That's a good question, because, you know, we want to help our clients. I mean, just that idea of being their best selves, right? What does that mean, for example? You know, what is your best self? You know, your best self one day is different to your best self another day. So I'm wondering whether a lot of these things, being your best self, having fulfillment, whatever else, being authentic, are doing things rather than things in themselves. And there was the Adam Grant quote that you sent me about. I don't know.
Shall we read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't put it on the screen, but I'll read it. So Adam Grant said, authenticity is not about expressing every opinion you hold. It's about ensuring that what you voice reflects what you value. So if you prize respect and kindness, your comments shouldn't be filled with contempt and cruelty. Ideas are worth sharing when they represent your ideals.
So there's something
That's
there about
interesting.
that. There's something there about values. There's something
Yeah.
there about that authenticity is about doing, is about being. And there was one thing that I read, you know, when I was reading a little bit of background this morning, about it, about that authenticity is about continuous becoming, right? That, you know, that we, you know, can we ever reach our authentic selves, like whatever that is, but that we're always trying to we're always moving towards it. I'm not quite sure what that means, but it makes more sense to me, at least, that I'm, and I feel more comfortable with it, because the thing about this essential authentic, my biggest fear about this essential authentic self is that it smacks of us essentialism, you know, and essentialism takes us down paths that are that can be very antithetical to, you know, many of the things I believe in, you know, and, you know, down the paths of racism, down the paths of, you know, homophobia, etc., etc. So, you know, I'm very wary of that kind of sense of essentialism. But this idea that we're forever becoming something that is closer to what, I'm not quite sure, something that's closer to fulfillment, to happiness, to satisfaction. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that that there's someone in our chat that's resonating with that, and I'm so sorry I can't tell who it is, because there's something going on with the platform that we're using. So thank you very much. But yeah, authenticity is about continuously becoming, and I agree. I think that it is, because something that you said earlier really resonated, where you know, there's being and there's doing, and if this is like becoming is almost sort of a conflation of two of them, isn't it? It's right. Like it's if I'm becoming, that's a verb, right? Well, I mean, being is as well, right? But you know, it's like a transitive verb. So it's there's an action that goes along with that. Like there is an agency that accompanies that somehow. And I wonder, oh, yeah, I think there's something really good, but also potentially dangerous, just like you said. Because if my authentic self is leading me down a path to where my values and my ideals are, oh, it's Manal. Hey, Manal. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I couldn't see who you were, but thank you for identifying yourself. Yeah, I think that it's got that that quality of I'm struggling. I'm struggling to, because it's so complex. There's so much stuff. But you're right. There is a potential for it to be dangerous.
I think. Go on.
And is that okay? Like, I mean, do I have to actually, like, I guess the question that I have is, if authenticity can lead down those dangerous paths to homophobia and racism and extractive capitalism and, all of the rest of the things that are ills in our world that we know about, then is it important? Like, I guess, what's the connection between, I don't know, like between authenticity and morality, or authenticity and ethics? Can I be unethical and still be authentic?
Well, that's the question. I was in a workshop the other day where the model that was being presented basically seemed to suggest that if you couldn't be trustworthy if you were inauthentic. And I thought, wow, I don't know if I'm authentic. Yeah, I don't know if I'm authentic most of the time. I mean, because I'm not really quite sure what my authentic self is, if there is one, really, and then does that make me permanently untrustworthy? I don't feel like that,
Yeah, that doesn't resonate with me either. But I do think, like, before we started this conversation, we had talked about sort of whether authenticity is purely individual, or whether it exists in relation to other people. And my response at the time was like, well, no, it can't just be individual. It has to be, in relation to others, because who cares if I'm authentic, if it's not with respect to how I'm interacting with other people. And it's still deeply personal, because it's what I'm thinking now is like, is there such a thing as an authentic murderer? Is there such a thing as an authentic criminal? And perhaps there is. So maybe authenticity isn't the sort of the path to enlightenment. It might be the path to self-understanding, though. And that's certainly something that, as coaches, we encourage, right? There's a curiosity that exists within everyone, and there's a power that exists when we can sort of turn that curiosity towards ourselves, which I'd argue is kind of what we're doing right now. What comes up for you?
I like that idea of it being a tool to understand ourselves better. I think, but the question is why do we have to call it authentic, right? And it kind of leads me to the question about what is it? Why is it that it's come up so predominantly in the last, say, 10 years? Like 10 years ago, no one talked about authentic selves. It's only since we've had social media and various things that there's this real importance to be your authentic self. And as we become more atomized, and less connected to each other and whatever else, and then suddenly seems to have gone hand in hand. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's chicken and egg. It seems to have gone hand in hand with this idea that we're we're on this path to find our authentic selves, and the more and more that happens, the less we are connected to other people. And the more and more it seems to be this predominant mindset, less compassionate, less empathetic, whatever mindset that's where my mind goes, and yet at the same time, I agree with you. There is that sense of understanding yourself, right? And of accepting, that sense of accepting yourself and accepting your limitations, being okay with them, all of that, I think becomes a huge relief. I mean, I've had various moments in my life where I've just suddenly thought, oh yeah, I'm this, like when I realized I was an artist, like I wasn't 40 before I was an artist. And I kind of suddenly thought, oh, maybe I could be an artist. And, there was this moment of just enormous relief. So there is something about things that we like, things that we gravitate towards, things that we've been denying ourselves because of social pressures and whatever, that become moments when we can individually inhabit something. And I guess if I were to describe authenticity, I might call it that, but I don't know, it's just so changeable that it could be called anything else at the same time. Really.
Well, that's so interesting because I'll direct us to the chat where Manel has suggested that that becoming authentic feels very much like the path to enlightenment in Buddhism. And as you were talking and as I was reading what Manel had offered, I thought, oh my goodness, there's really something really juicy and interesting in there, because the path to enlightenment is a very personal and spiritual journey, and it doesn't have any, if I understand it correctly, it doesn't have any particular expectation about what that enlightenment is. Right? It's like it's not deterministic and it's not objective driven. And I think the same could be said is true here, which is where being authentic is like it's a being, it's a state of being, it's something that we be rather than we do. And that maybe then authenticity or the demonstration or presentation of authenticity is something that's more of a reflection of who we are in the things that we choose to do. Right? Like being an artist is authentic, and you express that authenticity by creating art. Or is that too reductive?
Well, yeah, because there are so many barriers to that. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that
context.
It's
right?
The context. It's really the context, and I feel that about, I wonder how much, this idea of authenticity and whatever else is very much a product of, our privileged Western contexts, really, and or our privileged middle class contexts, professional ones or whatever, because we, if you don't have the means to be comfortable, or if suddenly you end up having to be in exile, or any one of a number of things, then how does that influence your authentic self? How does that influence your, if we like, sense of enlightenment? On the one hand, I think, it can inflect how you respond to your situation. But but this notion of fulfillment, authenticity and fulfillment and our best selves no longer kind of jives in that sense with the idea that it's how you respond to your situation, or it's what you make of your situation, or yeah.
Right. Externally, thank you, Manal. Externally viewed versus internal authenticity, and perhaps both are important. Perhaps they are.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting, and I'm conscious of the fact that we're coming up at time. But there's one other thing that I just wanted to bring in, because you mentioned that authenticity. I mean, I'm losing the thought. I said things, now I lost the thought. That happens in these live conversations sometimes. I'm so sorry. Maybe it'll come back to me. But anyway, so we are about 4 minutes away from the end of our conversation. Heidi, what's the thing that we want to leave behind?
I think for me, just a sense of having provoked thought, having loosened the straitjacket, if there is one around it, having thrown lots of balls in the air, having held up a mirror, whatever, to what it is, and so that, as coaches or just as individuals, we're more thoughtful and conscious when we use that word, I think.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
How about you?
For me, what this conversation has opened up, and I love it when conversations open things up. What this conversation has opened up is that authenticity is more complex than I'd given it credit for. And as I examine my own relationship to authenticity, which is, I think, the way that I'm going to proceed with this going forward, rather than assuming that it's something that I can just do or not do. But as I look at my own relationship with authenticity, I'm going to give myself some grace for the times that it's complex, and for the times that it seems misaligned. And I'm also going to give myself an opportunity to ask myself some questions about why. What doesn't feel right? And it aligns, I think, to the Adam Grant quote that we talked about earlier, where there's a values connection in it. What's important to me is important to me, and that's okay, and those are my values. And it's not necessarily what's important to anyone else, but it is how I'm going to interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that, even if authenticity is elusive, is going to be important. It's going to help.
I think that's great. I think that's really lovely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because I think that sense of how it moves you forward.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's messy.
Yeah.
And perhaps maybe also that it's not necessarily the goal, but it's something that happens along the way, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Because we have it as this goal, but maybe it's not the goal. Maybe it's just something that in the messiness of everyday life.
Yeah.
Authenticity.
It's something that you flirt with and go on a date with every now and then.
Yeah. I could do that.
Oh,
I could do that for sure.
I think so too. It makes it a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little bit more fun too, because I think that's the other thing is it can be fun.
Yeah.
And that's, if I was going to leave with an invitation, it would be, like, what would make it fun, right? The question that I like to ask myself whenever I'm in front of something really complex is, what would make this easy? And I think what would make this easy is having fun with it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And to just play with the different ideas of it and
exactly
see where it takes us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Heidi, we're at time.
Yes.
We are.
Time
So
flies.
exactly. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you.
especially Manal, for contributing, and everyone
Yeah.
else who's joined us today.
Yeah.
And once again, what I'll say is, Heidi, you can be reached at HeidiSchaeferCoaching.ca. And all your contact information is there, and my contact information is at toddkarges.com. So thank you. Yes.
Or on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if any thoughts
Which is,
come up, add the comments to this location. That would be great.
opportunities
Carry on
for
the
us to learn.
conversation.
We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I
you very
appreciate
much.
you, Heidi. Thank you.
And me, you. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'm going to turn us off.